Hey everyone, this is going to be a quick video on Mekugi fit and what to do when your Mekugi are too loose. So, this sword here, as you can see, the Mekugi are slightly loose. When I get bamboo, I will definitely be replacing these, but it's not too bad at the moment. But as you can see, I can move it with my fingers. May not be able to do this very easily, but there we go. As you can see, I can move that. So, I'm not a big fan of Mekugi being that loose. To me, if they are that loose, they need replacing. So I won't be using this sword until that's replaced. They're not, while that is loose, that is not the loosest I've seen. So if I had to, in a pinch, I suppose I could use it like that, but I'm not going to. I don't like Mekugi that loose. To me, if you can take your Mekugi Nuki or a punch of any type and push the Mekugi out, give me a second. If you can push the Mekugi out without too much difficulty like that, then they are way too loose, simply put. Now, this sword doesn't have the Mekugi Ana drilled the proper way. If it was proper, they'd be tapered and exiting this way. So that wouldn't be too big of a concern. But being that this Mekugi can come out either way, I don't like that. I will probably eventually fix that on this sword, but until then, this sword is just not going to be used. So, when your Mekugi are that loose, there is nothing you can do with the Mekugi. You know, once your Mekugi are loose, like this one here, for example, I'll just pop this out to show you. Once your Mekugi are too loose or damaged, cracked, splitting, anything, there's nothing you can really do. As you can see, this one here is not really cracked or splitting, it's just too small now. So, only thing you can really do at that point is replace them, simply. So, when your Mekugi are loose, don't chance it, okay? If your Mekugi come out, this blade could become a projectile. Back in the 80s, there was actually a demonstration held in Japan, and one of the practitioners had a sword with a single Mekugi, and his Mekugi was loose. Well, it fell out, he swung the sword, the blade became a projectile, and it killed a kid. So, that is why nowadays most swords have two Mekugi, and personally, I prefer two Mekugi. You don't need two Mekugi, especially if your ska is carved properly, which most of them aren't these days for a reasonable price. But even then, if I have one that is carved properly, I still prefer two properly done Mekugi over one. Just in case one gets loose, one breaks, or anything like that. It's just not worth it. Another interesting thing to note is if your Mekugi is too loose, your ska could be on there a bit loose. So one thing you can actually do, say if you notice some movement in the seppa or the suba, one thing you can do is just change the Mekugi and it'll pull everything back in tight. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when you are getting Mekugi, for good quality, I definitely recommend getting a piece of smoked bamboo, which you can get at several places online, and it's specifically made for Mekugi, and use that. On a lot of swords, especially cheap ones like this one here, cheaper ones anyways, a lot of times they use either chopstick material, which is not proper, or they use, wood. When Mekugi are properly made, they are made out of smoked bamboo, and the reason they are smoked is so that you get as much of the moisture out of there. It's dry bamboo then, so it's very strong. Now, another thing to keep in mind is with this chopstick material, sometimes the grain isn't right as well. So that's another thing to keep in mind is with the proper bamboo, you get a very strong Mekugi. Okay, the grain is proper and everything else. With the cheaper ones, it's just, to me, not worth it. One time I bought some cheaper Mekugi, they were already tapered, but they were basically chopstick material, and it was easy for me to break with my hands. So, to me, there's some places you may be able to cut corners with a sword, like maybe getting a less expensive Sagio or something like that. The Mekugi is not one of those places, because if the Mekugi fails, disaster can occur. So, that's one thing to always keep in mind. Now, some of my Mekugi are made of brass. But that's really not something I recommend for someone who doesn't know how to properly fit a Mekugi, because the bamboo will somewhat take the shape of whatever it is that you are pounding it into, in this case here. With the brass, you don't get that. Horn. Sometimes I use horn. Once again, I don't recommend it for other people. And honestly, I don't even use horn that much anymore. I don't. I use, on a lot of my swords, especially my Yaitos, brass on the bottom, bamboo on the top, and it is the proper bamboo. So, but for most people, I recommend just 2 bamboo. Most of my swords have just bamboo Mekugi. I don't have brass on very many of them, just a few of my swords. So, I hope this was helpful and informative. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya!